Our clerk's thumbs up. So we're going to get going with the afternoon section of the work session for the Washington County Board of Commissioners for October 20th, 2020. The first item on our agenda is Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission. So I'd like to invite Sheriff Garrett up, and we have a couple of other expert speakers. And yes, thank you for taking advantage of the spreading out space. And welcome to Maria Caballero Rubio and Olga Acuña. Do feel free to move your microphones because we want to make sure you've got good 6-foot space and there's wipes and sanitizer around. So we're totally into COVID spread prevention.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon. Testing. Thank you, Chair Harrington, and Commissioners. Thank you so much for allowing us some time to be with you this afternoon. I'm Sheriff Zach Garrett, and I'll just let our co-presenters say a bit about themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Caballero Rubio. I'm the Executive Director at Centro Cultural. I'm also the President of the Human Rights Council of Washington County and a member of the Latino Policy Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olga Acuña, and I am the interim president of the Latino Policy Council. I work for the Hillsborough School District, just an FYI.
And joined by these two community leaders and important colleagues, we are, I think you can tell from the expression on my face, we're really excited today about an important project going forward, and that is the establishment of a Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission.
Sheriff, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that microphone is having difficulty. Could I invite you to sit over here? Which I think Commissioner Rogers' mic works pretty well.
I do see the bright green light.
Okay.
Just appeared
Terrific.
magically. That's wonderful. I would just thank you, Chair. If it goes off, I'll move.
Yep.
Be quick-footed about it. But I just wanted to, we're excited to brief you about an important project into the future, and that is the creation of a Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission. Slide, please.
Thank you, Sheriff. So I am more than happy to share a few words about the background of the Latino Policy Council. Approximately 2 years ago, a small group of Latino community activists came together to explore how we, in our positionality, could organize and collaborate to bring about positive change to benefit not only the Latino community, but all of us in Washington County. And so a few months later, soon after our initial meeting, we became a Latino Policy Council with a group agreements, bylaws, you name it. And so we see ourselves as a coalition advocating for policies and practices that improve outcomes for Latinos and it eliminates racial disparities. As of today, there are 12 active members on the Latino Policy Council representing the various sectors in our community, from education to civic engagement, health services, the business community. Eventually, one of our goals is to be able to touch on all issues that are critical to the Latino community and to our community in Washington County, to include public safety and housing services. In early fall of last year, we hosted a sheriff's visit. We had a wonderful dialogue around the potential for partnering. Soon after that, we started inviting other key leaders in the community with the intention of building alliances and really expanding our collaboration efforts. In early June of this year, we called the meeting with the sheriff following the Molina case. It became very apparent to us that the collaboration with the sheriff was more critical than ever. The Molina case was the drop that caused the glass to overflow, and it created some urgency for us, similar to that of George Floyd's. So, in today's climate of civil unrest and the civil rights movement of Black Lives Matter, we feel strongly that a shared commitment to advancing a racially just future is absolutely necessary. So as we engaged in dialogue with the sheriff, we soon realized that forming a commission would be a better way to move toward transformational change. And I would like to invite my colleague, Maria Rubio, to talk to us a little bit more about the purpose of the commission.
So with that, in putting together and coming together to work with the sheriff, we came up with operating principles, and I think one of them that is, it's sort of unspoken, but it was very much emphasized, is that we work in partnership. That we are not here coming to the sheriff with demands. We are not coming here to try to defund the police or to do anything but to partner and to create change. And really just focus on those policies that negatively affect our community. I just want to make sure that I inserted that partnership aspect of our work together. And so the purpose is because we are the largest minority, and we've been here for a very long time, but we continue to be disproportionately overrepresented in policing enforcement, incarceration rates, and referrals to the juvenile justice system. So the Policy Advisory Commission is established to address these issues and to also build trust between the Sheriff's Office and the Latino community. Establishing an ongoing partnership is an important step in meeting the public safety needs, and want to emphasize this, of the entire community. I think it needs to start somewhere. I think that all of us are at various levels of communication and how we perceive and how we receive policing services. But so for us as a Latino community, because of the makeup of our community, we are so diverse. We have U.S.-born Latinos here. We have people who are immigrants, people who are asylees, refugees, and immigrant, and then we have the undocumented folks. So just taking into consideration all of those perspectives, we felt it was important that we establish this to kind of set the tone for the rest of the community.
And with respect to outcomes, it's clear to all of us at the table, really, and the people that we work with in our own areas, that issues of systemic institutional racism measurably impact many in our community. There's too many outcomes in the justice system which are inequitable for our BIPOC community, and we want to work together to address those inequities. Looking down that list of outcomes, something as elementary as increased communication could include increasing the number of and the kinds of languages our printed materials are provided. It could include adjustments to how we train. From a longer-term standpoint, it's a closer partnership in the recruiting function so that we can onboard more personnel that more accurately represent the diversity in our community. And then mutual understanding, that really is, there's opportunities, they're almost endless, right, for us to better understand the community wherein we serve, really, and vice versa. So we're looking forward to all of that. It's important, and I would invite my colleagues to share anything else.
So I did want to point out, in terms of the outcomes, that these outcomes were put together with a team of Sheriff's Office employees and also Latino community. These are not outcomes that we are imposing or anything. We basically did this work together.
So
Thank you.
their agreed upon desired outcomes is what I'm to
That's
understand.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
And from a process standpoint, I'm learning a lot as we go here. And one of the things that really Maria and Olga have helped me understand is adopting an anti-racist position requires that we use the language of race You can't get around that. You have to address that head on. And so for us, we just worked on this last week collaboratively to agree that, from an anti-racist position, we commit to identify and interrupt racism by changing organizational structures, policies, practices, and attitudes to transform systems that are inclusive and equitable. That is an audacious goal, but that is where our energy and focus is into the future, so that we can achieve true inclusiveness and equity across that part of the justice system where we work, and then who knows beyond that. I'll just let Maria and Olga, if you have anything else to add.
I would just add that, I absolutely love the direction that we are taking. It's one of inclusivity, and like Maria stated earlier, it is not our intention to come and be pushovers and, ask for mandates. We want to be part of the process. We want to collaborate. But at the same time, we also, we understand that there might be some language that most people are not as familiar with, that we are going to need to do a better job of explaining and working with. I know the anti-racist positionality may come across to some folks as, you're calling us racist. It is not the point. From my perspective, as a community leader, it is not just okay to call myself not racist. So with the knowledge and understanding and the awareness and the critical consciousness that now is in front of me, my role is acting. And what do I do with that knowledge? And what do I do with that influence, with that power, right? So that's where the anti-racist lens comes from.
And I would just add, the middle of the slide there, potential missions for the commission. It would include coordinating full-scale deployment of body cameras, if that is something your commission decides to do with respect to messaging, policy, and just hearing back from our community about the impacts of that deployment. And then what I've heard loud and clear from our colleagues is that though it is a Latino Advisory Commission, Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission, they're really focused on all marginalized communities. So we're interested in bringing those voices to the table, not just in our Latino community, but truly our BIPOC community. And this is just a structure, a mechanism by which we can get those voices to the table and engage in a deeper, more meaningful way, and inform us about how we can better serve our entire community.
And in terms of process, I just want to say that at the Latino Policy Council level, we have done a lot of soul searching and done a lot of discussion back and forth, because there are folks in there who have been throughout their lives traumatized with, police interactions, and so it's not going to be easy. We're bringing in folks who have different perspectives than what we have, and then we're also inviting deputies to sit at the table so that we can together hear the stories and learn from each other, and hopefully begin to build trust. Because I think that that's the bottom line here, is to build trust between public safety and the Latino community. So I think we're ready. We've been talking and sharing and meeting, and so we'll keep you posted on how things go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for putting the time and the effort and to help all of us collectively make better decisions, to be better informed, to make the community safer, and make our good sheriff department even better. And I'm very heartened by this, and I want to thank both of you and the sheriff actually collectively as well.
Other commissioner comments or questions?
Well, I was just going to comment too that I'm extremely pleased, Olga, that you've joined this group. I didn't realize you were the president of the organization, but for those of you who may or may not know, Olga was city councilor with me in the 8 years that I was mayor, and I always appreciated her insights and things. And so, thank you for spending the time and committing to this project.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Treese?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, the three of you, for being here, for presenting this. And I think this is a great way to get started. I do have a couple questions that I'd just like to throw out there for discussion. One is, my understanding is that this is an advisory committee, not an oversight committee. And there's a big separation between those two, correct?
That is correct, Chair Harrington, Commissioner Treese. We really envision this to be a partnership, rather than an oversight function. So yes, you're correct.
That's not to say that we're not going to call out things when we see them.
Absolutely.
We just are not
For sure.
calling ourselves an oversight. Yeah. And we're learning also, an end goal, I think, is that sitting at the same table over a period of time, learning from each other, learning about what police do and the policies that they work with, and learning about what the community's needs are. It won't take on that role of oversight, but more of partnership and how do we move forward together.
I happen to believe that that's the best way to start. So I support it. I just wanted to clarify what the difference is. So then the other question I have is, we receive feedback through our listening sessions and through public comment about our BIPOC community. Are we, by calling this the Latino Advisory Committee, are we, you're shaking your head?
No, it's the Sheriff's Office Policy Advisory Commission.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm incorrect in saying that it is, that the Latino concept, that is not in the title.
The working title that we have right now is the Sheriff's Office, pardon us for not being more clear about this, the Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission.
Okay.
So and my question is, are we unintentionally, and I work with Maria, I know where your heart is, so are we unintentionally separating other parts of our community by using that title? I just raised that issue.
My personal perspective is no. The African-American community has done amazing work with trying to do systems change and also with police brutality and all of those kinds of things. That unifies us more than it divides us. I think this is going to unify us because honestly, we're all in this together. We feel the same things. We experience the same things. So whatever we do to improve relationships between the Latino community and law enforcement is going to benefit all of us, I think. That's my perspective and my impression. The other thing that, and the reason I'm here as Centro Cultural, because I'm one of the members and kind of the founders of the Latino Policy Council. The Centro Cultural is the fiduciary agency to the LPC until we get our 501c4 in place. We are in the process. So that's kind of why I'm here, kind of sitting between the two folks. But it's very important to me that we work in collaboration with other communities of color. I think that's vital. And then, as I mentioned before, one of the things that we're doing as well is that we're going to the Law Enforcement Council, where all the police chiefs meet with the DA and the sheriff, and we're beginning a process of bringing in communities of color to present to them. We did the first one, the Centro Cultural. The next one will probably be the Muslim Education Trust that will come and present to that group about not only their culture and what their organization does, but what are the issues that impact us as a Muslim community. And then we're going to invite the Asian community to present, and then the African American. So we have this this plan to kind of include everyone for that very purpose.
And thank you. And I respect and believe that that's the case. I was just bringing up the issue of the naming and the communication in that regard. I really appreciate both of your participation, and Sheriff Garrett, my hat's off to you for recognizing that this is an important issue. I appreciate looking at this opportunity through the lens of the body-worn cameras as well. I think that that gives us a lot of advantage with our community, so thank you.
So I want to thank you for continuing to be one of the leading departments in the whole arena of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You were one of the 4 who was really leading our efforts here, 4 departments who are really leading. I would actually counsel you to not call it the Latino Advisory Commission, and instead be the Sheriff's Office Policy Advisory Commission, and focus primarily on the needs and experience of Latino community members for the first 2 years or so. I mean, that's a time frame up to you, while inviting the experiences of other BIPOC community members. And why do I say that? It's not to diminish at all the experience to date, but I have gotten feedback from others in the community while I've been chair and prior to being chair about making sure that we're recognizing and welcoming various community members' needs, while as things get underway, there is a need to focus where there's the greatest need. But also your draft outcomes, your agreed upon desired outcomes initially, these same things. If you, in the second bullet, if you took out the word justice, all of those bullets are relevant to every part of this agency, right? To every part of our community. Job well done. Job well done. I have no problem with your focusing primarily on the overwhelming need of our Latino community members. And thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank you for participating in our listening series and continuing to echo through particularly the chat that body-worn cameras are a tool that can help us to improve our transparency and our accountability. We do, within this agency, have another commission called the Policy Advisory Commission. So everywhere, we're at a minimum going to need to shorthand SO for Sheriff's Office. Policy Advisory Committee, or Commission.
Thank you, Chair. We'll take that back and work on that.
And we will leverage liberally. Isn't that the word I want to use? That's the polite way of saying steal your best information, your best experiences, your both the do wells and the, ooh, darn, we didn't do so well on that one, but we're going to learn from it and we're going to do better. Absolutely right there with you in terms of the partnership and the collaborating. We are a better community together in collaborating and helping one another rise to the occasion and the opportunity. I assume that you're able to do this work within your current adopted budget?
Thank you for the terrific question. The short answer is yes. We have identified the support role that we need to play, to provide, to make this go. We are locked and loaded.
Okay.
Sorry, that's an awful
It is really awesome.
euphemism. I will do push-ups when I get back.
Oops.
We are ready to go.
Thank you, thank you. And please do let us know if further championing of topics, information is needed. I know my colleagues are all committed to this space, as we all want to do a better job in serving the community we face.
And Chair, if I may, just to kind of respond to your advice about removing the Latino, we thought long and hard about this. I've lived here since 1969, and there are others who, I mean, this community, we've been here for a very long time. We have not seen or experienced much change. We're at the point where we've been the longest minority here and the largest, and it's time that we step up. And I think that we need to maintain our identity here. There's so much social change happening in this world. I mean, we were reduced down to POCs, now we're BIPOCs, you know? Where is our identity? So that's a part of our discussion at the table with the LPC. So I totally understand and respect your perspective about inclusion. We are inclusive, and we will be, we make that commitment to be inclusive. That's a conversation that we have had already at the table.
I just want to say.
So is this the LPC
Now,
Advisory Committee or the Sheriff's Office Advisory Committee?
Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission is the name that we did spend a good deal of time on that
Okay.
part of this group.
So any constituent feedback we get on being exclusive, or that I get, is going to you.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just wanted to say that, thank you, Maria, for bringing that up. We understand that there are communities within a community, and there is a diversity. There are diversity within diversity, and so we don't want to encroach on other groups' cultural perspectives. And so I feel that by forming the Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Committee, that we will set an example for other groups that perhaps want to organize in a similar way and collaborate with us. We welcome that. We want to be inclusive.
Yeah, and I think I would agree. The Latino community is certainly, as you've said, the largest group of our community, and I know that Olga worked really hard as a city councilor to invite the Latino community into, I won't say politics, but certainly city works, and I think it is time that we have this advisory committee, and I like the way that you described it initially by reaching out to the other minority organizations and inviting them in to hear your conversations and your discussions, your policy discussions and those things. And so I think you've done a good job of thinking through this, the title of this group, and I would encourage you to leave it not in opposition to the chair, but certainly I think it's fitting for what of the target market we're trying to reach.
Yeah, let this grow a little bit organically from you know.
So if people are interested, they can look at the Washington County calendar to see when these meetings are scheduled?
We, getting back to our last slide, we're working on our bylaws now. We have the composition of the commission identified. We don't have the first meeting yet, but every 2 to 3 weeks, we are having planning meetings. I would suspect the next month or two, we're going to schedule that first meeting, and we will certainly communicate through your public affairs and our own public affairs about when those meetings get scheduled,
They do need to be noticed publicly.
for
Okay.
sure. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your work.
All right, we'll move on to the next topic of the agenda, the draft staff and federal legislative agenda for 2021.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Commission, Elizabeth Mazzara-Myers, Interim Government Relations Director today. I'm wondering if Jajit, Aaron, and Paige are online? Great, thank you. And I've got a minute to chat before they need to be on, so. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I had to get myself centered there for a minute. So today is going to be a first look at the state and federal agendas. So you got them, I know, during your meeting with the intention that today's plan is to walk you through it. Next slide, please. And sorry, I might have to take this off. I have trouble seeing my paper with this mask on. So before I begin, I want to reassure you that the printed agenda is in front of you. That today is our goal is to navigate these agendas. These are the first draft. And so we're going to highlight what's new and highlight a few issues for you. This first slide, we're going to have two timeline slides. This gets us from today to the beginning of legislative session in 2021. So we move through October and November to adoption. We have some more state forecasts, some legislative updates from the team, and then we land in January and things get up and running, assuming things get up and running. So next slide. And here I just wanted to highlight the parts where you engage. So today's the 20th. We're going to give you the first draft. For the next 2 weeks, there's opportunity for input and questions from the board. We can either, if you'd like, set up meetings with you, or if you just want to reach out to members of the GR team as you have questions, that's an option. By Friday the 30th, in your packet for work session on the 3rd, you'll have the second draft, so that will reflect comments from the board. We're back before you on the 3rd of November with that draft, and then any final comments will move forward to an adoption, hopefully on November 17. So I just want to make sure there's any questions about that timeline. Great. All right. So now that we have that highlighted, I wanted to give you a roadmap for the rest of this presentation. We are taking Administrator Angie's advice to heart, so we are trying to do the 20-minute, I forget what the formula is, but 1/3 talking, 2/3 conversation, so that's our goal. So part one will be focused on the proposed state legislative priorities with an overview of some specific issues you'll be hearing more about. Part two will focus on our federal agenda, and then part three will highlight the proposed Clean Water Services agenda. Next slide. Oh, and sorry, this is me highlighting again. The goal today is not to do a deep dive into the individual legislative issues, but again, rather to help you navigate the agendas, highlight some of the guiding principles, et cetera. So as promised during our last presentation, I'm bringing back this slide. This is a reminder of how we're framing your legislative agenda. The guiding principles are derived from board direction and reflect the county's values and strategic goals. These should remain fairly static over time. Next are legislative priorities, whether they're policy or budget. These are driven by the current needs of the county and interests of the board. These may change annually, and these may be updated, as we did with COVID, as things arise. And then county initiatives. These are best described as discrete projects or programs. They may rise to the top of an agenda for a certain number of years and then may fall off once that project is completed. Currently, we don't have any county initiatives we're moving forward in this agenda, in either of the proposed agendas. Just want to just pause. I don't know that we have any questions. We've gone over that one. Great, next slide. Okay, so the next two slides are the Washington County Guiding Principles. I'd like to make a note that because we are in draft mode, on the bottom it says see draft legislative agenda, page 4. That's actually page 3 now, so apologies. We took a slide out, or took a page out. So in your state legislative agenda, if you look at page 3, you can follow along in these guiding principles. Great. I'm not going to read through these. What we've done this year is these are the same that you adopted in the 2020 legislative agenda, as marked by the check notes next to each one in the principal. I want to highlight that as a team, we met with the CEIO Tillman. She provided some insightful feedback and recommendations to both our guiding principles and our legislative priorities. You'll hear me say this a few times. We did include edits around the legislative priorities, but because best practice for developing guiding principles involves a larger, longer-term board discussion, we've noted those, we have those available to you, but we've not made those changes in this version. Of course, if you want those sooner, I'm happy to share. So next slide. So again, just continuing through the already standing guiding principles that, that you've seen before. Again, on the bottom of that slide, that should say page 3. Great, thank you. And now we're on slide number 8. That's correct, great. So what we're going to start now is what is new. So these are the proposed state legislative priorities. This year, we recommend 6 priorities that bring to the forefront critical investment and policy needs for the county. You will see these on page 4, not page 5 of your state agenda. As a reminder, back in July, the government relations team worked with departments to identify priorities, and then through August and September, worked together to identify these high-level state priorities. You'll see that we are asking you to add in the COVID-19 priority that was previously an addendum to your 2020 state and federal agendas. So, the priorities. We're asking you to, once again, give us the leeway to do work in regards to both funding and constituent relief around COVID-19. We're asking for flexible policies and funding mechanisms to improve health and human services outcomes for our communities. We're asking you to support investments in regional transportation infrastructure projects. Next slide. To prioritize investments in workforce development, including programs focused on workforce diversity. We are seeking to restore funding and cost recovery for county programs and services with a focus on community corrections, the county law library, and juvenile conciliation services. And finally, we're looking to secure funding that supports our household populations, renters, and owners. And what I'd like to do is take a pause here, because on the next slide, the government relations team will be highlighting some issues that fall within these priorities. So we'll give you some real-life examples of how these high-level priorities will be worked on by the team. So next slide. So we have Jajit, who's going to take our first 2 items, community corrections and law library and juvenile conciliation.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh, we lost you, Jajit.
You muted. There you go.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. So Chair Harrington, Commissioners, my name is Jagjit Nagra, Government Relations Manager for Washington County. It's great to see you all. At the top of the list, you're going to see community corrections. This is a path we've all been down before, right? Let me give you a bit of a rewind as to why this remains a priority for the county. Back in the outset of this calendar year, we had the 2020 short session. Washington County was successful after a lot of full court press in terms of advocacy in securing funding for community corrections in the budget bill. But due to the walkout, the bill was never signed into law, and thus the monies were never appropriated. So fast forward to now, October, we still haven't received adequate funding, from the state in regard to community corrections. And so nothing has really changed, right, from a funding perspective. And so thus this remains a priority for the county. I've talked to all of you individually about this at length. There has been a bit of a shift in the narrative, so I look forward to filling you all in about that in detail, one-on-one or however you best see fit. But, I think that given the fact that we're finding ourselves in this predicament over and over again, I also want to advocate for, in addition to providing robust funding for community corrections from the state, I want to have a larger conversation that may manifest itself as a work group. Because if the funding formula isn't working, if we're not going to be beholden to the actual cost study and bear the burden of paying all the costs and resources it takes to do the cost study to sort of satisfy the requirements of the pre-existing formula, the funding formula, if this is all up for reconsideration, we should be having those conversations starting in earnest now, right? So we have a chance of perhaps getting to them in the 2022 short session or possibly 2023. That's a longer term goal, but I think it's one that will be well worth the effort. I'm going to pause there on community corrections. Are there any questions at this point? Not seeing any. I will move on. I'm going to speak about law library and the juvenile conciliation in sort of the same breath, but that's not necessarily the same to say that the advocacy will be the same. If you recall, when I first raised this a few weeks ago, probably a couple months ago at this point, the way that the Oregon Judicial Department appropriates money to both law library and juvenile conciliation, both of these are also state mandated functions, they're two separate streams. But Oregon revised statutes also allow for county board of commissioners to use county law library money also for conciliation services. And so back in 2011, a previous board, our county board, elected to use 60% of those funds from county law library appropriation specifically for our juvenile conciliation budget. And as you can imagine, why that was done is because, well, we weren't getting enough money from the state. That funding stream has never been plussed up. So we're talking about a couple of decades here, if not 3. County law library at that time, at least from the county's purview, actually had some reserves. And so this was a strategic decision that was made. But where we find ourselves now is that from the state level, conciliation has not been funded adequately. And now similarly, law library funding is falling into the same pattern because due to the special session budget adjustment bill, statewide county law library funding was reduced by $925,000, which had this sort of dual effect on the county, this bifurcated effect of not only impacting our law library, but also our conciliation budget. So there's currently work groups looking at both of these issues. We're involved. We're going to be pressing with our legislators to secure funding and to make sure that we can continue to provide these state mandated services in a meaningful way that serves our entire community. So I will stop there for any questions.
Sorry for the noise. I thought my mic was off. I would ask you folks, as the expert lobbyists for our agency, what phrase can I use instead of stealing from Peter to pay Paul? Because it is very clear to me that our state legislature and the governor are in a situation where, in order to make headway in some area, we're taking money from another critical area, and we're just recirculating and not making appreciable progress on things. So I'm not sure stealing from Peter to pay Paul is the best expression. I'm really looking for one that recognizes this pattern that is happening.
Well, and if I could to that, Chair, I don't know that I have an alternate expression, but I will say the conversation that Judge Eaton and I have had, and he's had with his colleagues around creating a work group, for example, for community corrections, and saying, look, if the actual cost study is not going to be used, then we need to do something else, right? So let's rethink this system. And I think that's where it is. We need to rethink how we're programming these dollars rather than just shifting and shifting and shifting. So I'll leave it to my colleagues to see if they have a pithy statement instead of Peter to Paul, but I think the bottom line is we need better solutions rather than just shifting the dollars.
Well, and I would amend that statement a little bit. We need to make changes to the system now.
Thank you, yes.
Not talk about them for
Yes.
another 5 or 6 years,
Yes.
but now.
Agreed, yes.
So
Thank you.
Chair, unfortunately, I don't have a hot off the press one-liner for you to deploy your advocacy. What I can say is that the conversation is dire in the sense that, look, legislators and appropriators and other people who are holding the purse strings, what services are you going to force us to reduce for our community that needs these services and relies on these services? What are you going to force us to essentially remove from the docket in terms of the platter of options that we can provide, right? And that, I think, is a more sort of acute conversation. And that's at least where I'm sort of, in my personal advocacy, that's where I tend to take the conversation, because that's the real world effect. We're talking about FTEs, We're talking about from the county's purview, but then we're also functionally talking about services we're trying to provide to our community. And so, you know, I don't want to rely necessarily on a one-liner. I just kind of want to come in with the truth.
Thank you.
Aaron, you're up next. Oh, sorry, back one slide. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioner Erin Doyle, Government Relations Manager. I handle transportation, land use, economic development, and clean water services for you. I just wanted to quickly note on the transportation topic. If you look at the draft state agenda on page 7, you'll see a very important note at the bottom of the page that this item will be updated in response to the November 3rd election results. What I want to assure you is that we are looking across the board at regional needs for the entire transportation system and not just focused on one particular portion of what we're hoping to find funding for. But we're looking at finding funding for a variety of regional transportation projects. And so dependent upon how November 3rd's ballot measure related to transportation funding works, we may call for specifically bringing in the state share of the revenues needed to complete some of those projects, Southwest Corridor in particular. But if we do not have a new local revenue source, we'll be looking at for the state to provide other investments or what other strategies might be necessary in order to provide funding for desperately needed multimodal investments in transportation and safety within Washington County and the region. So in addition to that, we'll also be looking at how the state does its refinancing, as ODOT is starting to say that they don't have sufficient funding to provide for everything that they've done in the past and are looking at ways to reduce their portfolio of work or cut their costs and what impacts that might have to funding available at the local level. So all of those things will fit into what becomes that final draft agenda statement. And unfortunately, the next time we're in front of you will be on November 3rd. So we won't have final language that day either, but we'll have a better sense of perhaps of what the two frameworks might look like depending upon the results. So that way we'll have something final come our final presentation later in November. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions about a very vague priority.
I just have a quick overarching question for all the presentations. Are we looking, we're kind of at the higher level, abstract, broad concepts, broad strokes. Are you looking that by the end of this process in mid-November, looking at some very specific, more specific policy bills and programs and funding asks?
Absolutely, Commissioner Scouten. If you look at your state agenda booklet, you'll see that on page 4, that's what we're covering now, those high-level legislative priorities.
Right.
These are the ones that really give the lobbyists opportunity to be nimble during session, right? But then you'll see that there's page numbers attached to them. And within each of those, there's more specific items. Some are very specific to a funding item. Some are maybe a little broader for programmatic areas. But you'll see maybe a little more detail that you're looking for there. Of course, until bills are filed and available, we won't know which bills they're moving forward on. But I think if you can kind of think of it as the guiding principles kind of start up here, and then we go down to the legislative principles, then the page numbers that give us the specifics, and then we end up with all the bills down at the bottom. And that's sort of, we won't have that final piece until January, February. So any other questions? Paige, you're up.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. And for the public, I am Paige Spence. I manage government relations for the county in the areas of community development, housing services, and health and human services. So I want to talk about the health and human services budget. And this proposed priority really boils down to urging that the state fully fund our work, especially the work that we are statutorily obligated to do. And at a minimum, advocating against cuts to the state dollars that we receive from the Oregon Health Authority, given the current economic climate. I also do not have a pithy alternative to robbing Peter to pay Paul, except for to say that we are constantly faced with those kinds of questions at the legislature, where someone will say, well, what's more important, county veteran service officers or county staff that work on isolation for older adults, right? And they are all super important safety net services. So it is our goal to make sure that all of this work is fully funded and that we're not asked to make those tough choices. So for today, I'm going to touch on two topics within the Oregon Health Authority's budget requests to the governor, who will then submit her recommended budget to the legislature for the 2021 session. And so the topics that would generate funding streams for Washington County Health and Human Services that you'll hear about more as we approach session are first, county public health, and second, county mental health services. And I also wanted to mention that I am pleased to report that the entire framework for the Oregon Health Authority's budget requests, including the funding that would flow to Washington County in the next biennium, focuses on investments to eliminate health inequities. And I know that's a goal that your board and our HHS team shares. So first, public health. In their budget requests, the Oregon Health Authority has nearly $70 million for public health modernization. And since the passage of public health modernization legislation in previous years with limited funding along the way, the legislature, the health authority, and local public health officials like Tricia Mortel here at Washington County are seeking to modernize our public health system to ensure that public health protections are in place for all Oregonians through equitable, outcomes-driven, and accountable services. And the groundwork laid through the initial investments in public health modernization have been very important to Oregon's management and Washington County's management, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, pandemic response has highlighted the continued gaps in the public health system. So for the 2021 session, Washington County HHS and Government Relations, with your approval, will work to help pass OHA's public health modernization funding request, which supports implementation of key public health programs here at our county public health division. And as a reminder, Washington County hosted legislators last December in partnership with the Health Authority and our neighboring counties to show some of the great public health field work that our staff does, including our harm reduction ban and infectious disease work. And we continue to build champions in the legislature who really understand what public health work entails and why it matters. And then a pivot to mental health. And so this is a topic that you heard about in the in the 2020 session, which is County Mental Health Aid and Assist. And Jagjit already, I appreciate, flagged the process from 2020 about how community corrections was fully funded in the omnibus budget bill that would have passed but for the walkout. Same is the case with County Mental Health Aid and Assist. So now for the second year, with your board's approval, Government Relations will request funds for this program that are also in the Health Authority budget request to increase community services to meet the immediate needs of people who have been arrested and court-ordered for mental health services under Oregon's Aid and Assist laws. And that will provide better coordination between courts, the state hospital, county mental health, and substance use disorder service providers for people who have intensive behavioral health service needs. We know that when people have access to proper behavioral health services at the right time, they have a better chance of recovery. And Washington County as an organization will be in a stronger position to remain in compliance with our legal obligations under the Aid and Assist laws. So following the adoption of our legislative agenda, with your board's approval, of course, Government Relations will seek to bring home our share of needed funds for this work. And the total OHA ask for this work is just over $23 million, with details continuing to be refined. So that's what I had to share with you this afternoon, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions?
And this is the end of part one. So if you have questions about the state legislative agenda, we're happy to answer them now before we move on to the federal.
Well, the email that you sent out at my request of the financial impact, I really appreciated that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we could have got this information sooner, but I think that's what I particularly look at when I'm looking at legislative activity, I guess. My question probably, so in the future, I'd like to see that a little bit sooner. Also, my question is, what's being cooked today as we speak that's going to be ready for prime time, I guess, when we open the doors in February.
Well, if I could jump in first, I will say thank you for that comment, Commissioner Willie. Because we, as staff, can't engage in political advocacy, we needed to wait for the voters pamphlet to be available to provide you that information.
Oh, I see, okay.
But I will make a note so that we know when the voters pamphlet comes out to do a quick review, pull those forward, and then provide them to you, but we can't make comment on them. So I just wanted to address that
Comments
piece.
until it's public in the voters pamphlet, huh?
That's right. We do, like, as staff, we are just going to provide you the information that's publicly available. And I see, I'm getting lots of head nods from the county council, so, yes, yeah. Okay, so,
Okay.
great. And then I'll turn it over to Aaron, Paige, and Jajit, if you think there's anything hopping down in Salem. I know they are in the process of putting together operational plans for how people will return to the building, what it would look like. They have the least likely, most likely, and worst case scenarios. And it sounds like, per the plan we've seen, sometime in November, we'll have a better sense of what the operations actually will look like. And I assume part of that is whether they wait till that after the February flu season to meet in person. But in terms of the subject matter, I'll turn it to these folks, and I see the chair has a hand first.
Well, I think related to that question, I remember getting this great calendar from Aaron that helped me understand the pathway from where we are today, legislative days, legislative concepts, and then the start filed bills going into the new session, and then the session starting, and then following from there. So in my mind, remembering that general framework, my sense is that over the next 3 months, this team is going to be hopping busy, keeping track of the legislative days that are in process and bills that are being crafted prior to being filed so that they can come back to us in a future month, like in January sometime, and say, these are the bills that are filed thus far. Here's a set of them that we think are most critical to our state legislative agenda. It's that kind of, maybe you have a next step somewhere, but I don't mean to get ahead of anything, but am I in the right sort of frame?
Absolutely, and we actually had some of those details, and I ignored the advice of my colleagues, and I took them out of this timeline because I wanted to focus on your role in adopting the agenda. But we do have those legislative dates that we can add back in, and certainly, of course, depending on when session begins, based on operations, some of that may change.
Oh, right.
I'm not sure
Okay.
if they'll keep their deadlines or if things will just be out circulating in advance of meeting.
Okay.
So it may be a little different this year, but as soon as we have more solid information, certainly that'll be coming back to you. And again, as soon as bills start getting filed, the 3 government relations managers will be coming forward to with the packets of information where we start really looking at the bill tracker and getting a
Well,
sense
you've
of those
certainly whet
priorities.
my appetite for making sure I read those GR updates that will be coming in the next few months.
I will remind you that as we move towards legislative session, the weekly memo will be replaced with that bill tracker, right? And so rather than giving you that high-level informational view, you'll really be able to dig in as much as you want to on the different issues with highlights from the GR managers on where you should be putting your focus, where we might need your help, excuse me.
So do we know the date
Elizabeth?
that the first bill can be dropped?
I bet Aaron Doyle or Paige knows.
Sorry.
Sorry, put you on
This
the
is Erin. I was going to say, as much as I'd love to take credit for that calendar last year, Chair, that calendar is provided by the Secretary, or the House Speaker's Office and the Clerk of the House to kind of keep track of things. And because we're in flux about how they'll be starting session, we don't have a copy of that calendar to provide you. Similarly, that because they're in flux, we don't know what the first date is. It has now been shifted traditionally in a long session to the first Monday after MLK, which I believe we established was January 19th. I'm looking to Paige to confirm. She's confirming.
Tuesday, but yes.
Tuesday, whatever.
But yes.
They're just days of the week. They don't matter anymore. So we expect if they continue down that path, that will be the first day that they can officially drop bills. But there are plenty of legislative concepts that are currently being drafted, discussed. I think you heard about one of them this morning related to solid waste from Paige. I've been working with some of my colleagues about information related to economic development, potential legislative concepts and investments. I can't speak to a lot of detail there because we're all very much getting our first drafts back from Legislative Council before they come back forward. But if there are any major issues, whether they're related to the priorities that we're going to work to develop with you over the next month, or other big areas where the county is going to be impacted by them, we will come back to you, of course. That's all I wanted to say from my portfolio's perspective. I don't know if my colleagues had further answers to Commissioner Willie's original question.
I can quickly just touch on a very few things that are coming down the pike. Yes, so as Aaron and I mentioned, I was pleased to present with Tom and Marnie this morning about the DEQ recycling package. I know that a lot of folks are talking about bringing the tobacco retail licensure bill back that we worked on in 2020, universally offered home visiting, and then of course, which is a program for new mothers that has been established in law but not yet funded. And then, of course, we'll be still looking at rent assistance, eviction moratoriums, payments for landlords, foreclosure moratoriums, and things like that, which is both a housing issue and a public health issue as we strive to keep folks stably housed during the pandemic. So yes, in our meetings between now and session, we should start, as Aaron mentioned, getting more bill drafts back, being looped into more conversations of what legislators are thinking and driving. And we will look forward to providing you the bill tracker with all the details in January once things really get underway, providing, of course, that we are still operating under the normal timeline.
In the spirit of moving on, because I know there's more, on December 15th, we'll have the legislative update.
That's right. That'll be back to your monthly update on the 15th. That's right.
Okay, so I do one more quick question, just pertinent to the election that's coming up. Has there been conversations about how to avoid another Republican walkout in the Senate?
There's a bonus for anyone that can answer that question. Hearing rumors of negotiations, but in the interest of not rumor mongering, I'll say that I think that there are discussions happening at a level that is above my pay grade, and so we're hoping for the best at this point.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Willie, I think that we're stepping into speculation and punditry, which is something I don't like to do. But what I can tell you is that there's gamesmanship from the Democratic side to get into a higher place of majority so that the walkout isn't an issue, securing more seats, right? In terms of conversations in earnest between both sides of the aisle about amicability and coming together and finding solutions that work for both without walking away, I'm not so sure those conversations have taken place.
So how many seats would have to change party?
I think we're talking about 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And I don't even know how many is up for election at this point in time. I'm not.
For the sake of the rest of our agenda, those are great conversations to have offline.
I can have those on my own leisure, huh? Okay.
Okay, great. So next slide, please. So before we jump into part 2, which is the proposed federal agenda, I wanted to provide you this explainer slide. As I was going through the previously adopted guiding principles and legislative priorities in the federal agenda, I found that the building blocks that we've now accepted to define guiding principles and legislative priorities, that there were some items that were leaning towards merging these 2 building blocks. Knowing that there's, again, a strategic board and CAO conversation on the horizon, rather than recommending a wholesale change in these, we instead are asking you to consider adopting 3 additional guiding principles to the federal agenda in lieu of specific legislative priorities. I believe that these guiding principles provide sufficient direction and cover for all the critical needs that are important for the county. I've got 3 slides that we'll walk through. 2 slides are the already previous approved federal guiding principles. And then the 3rd slide will be the recommended ones. So next slide, please. You can find these in your federal agenda if you want to just crosswalk them to page 3. So no surprises in those first two slides. Next slide. And so you'll see things like opposing efforts to preempt and restrict, reduce, or eliminate existing federal revenue resources, supporting federal financing tools for local government to support, build, and preserve affordable housing, and legislation that provides for the creation of long-term funding sources dedicated to affordable housing, supporting the adoption of long-term federal transportation authorization that provides stable and reliable funding stream for transportation. So again, those two slides, you're not going to see any surprises there. If I can be on slide 14 now. There we go. These are the three proposed additions that we'd like to add. If, again, just to help you with the walking through, if you're on page 3 of your federal agenda, you'll see these reflected as the first three. These are not necessarily in order. I just wanted to make them easy for you to find. The first is a COVID recovery and relief. Same language as in the state, but for the federal government, identifying secure funding and constituent relief for all COVID-19 related programs and services. International trade, promote participating in international agreements that improve market access and increase demand for Oregon-made products, and advance efforts that benefit our other identified county priorities, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing energy efficiency. And finally, a health and human services priority that states providing affordable healthcare coverage and equal access to age-appropriate and evidence-based healthcare services, including adequate funding for behavioral health services. The way that we came to these, just to be clear, so again, the process was still the same for the government relations teams working directly with the departments. And as we looked at the federal agenda, these were the ones that surfaced that we felt hadn't been covered adequately in the guiding principles. I know it's an unusual request, and if the board chooses not to follow that, that's okay. We can certainly go back to the other format and rewrite these as legislative priorities. That's not a problem at all. We just wanted to provide a maybe more elegant or simpler solution for this year. And again, I know it's probably the fourth time I've said it, but with the planning ahead of you, I think there's real opportunity to dig into this. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to reflect current values and needs of the county, maybe some things that need some refreshing, and maybe some things you'll replace. But again, that's a board-led conversation with the CAO.
I was having a little difficulty with the wording of this last one.
Okay, great.
Because there's a providing, including.
Okay.
But I think providing affordable health care coverage, ensuring equal access to age-appropriate and evidence-based health care services,
Good catch, thank you.
and including adequate funding.
And my sense is that that won't be the first time you're going to find something that needs an edit, thus the draft number 1. So thank you for that.
Well, and I think I was only focusing on it because you were highlighting these proposed additions.
Absolutely.
So I was like,
Great.
okay, what's the concept? So
Thank you.
I can certainly identify with all 3 of these proposed additions. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Yeah,
It's a robust set.
I think they're important additions.
sure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
And a reminder that throughout both the state and federal sessions, that as items arrive that we need to be paying attention to that we hadn't considered, like COVID-19, GR will always come back and ask for direction to ensure that this new area has your support and coverage as they go out and work on it. But it does feel like these higher level guiding principles get us there for the federal agenda this year.
And
Great.
does the, I'm sorry, at the federal level, I just don't remember when the new Congress convenes. Is that the same day as the presidential inauguration day?
We have it on the agenda, ODRATS. We don't have the date. I don't have the dates that they come into
But it's
session.
somewhere around there, right?
Yeah, January they commence and they engage, we start engaging in February, but
Okay.
I'll have them in the next one.
That's helpful. That's all I need to know for now. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so now we're going to move to part 3, which is clean water services, both state and federal agenda for them. Erin Doyle has clean water services in her agenda, or excuse me, in her portfolio. Just to, again, help you navigate in your federal agenda, pages 4 and 5 are clean water services. And in your state agenda, pages 10 And 11 are your clean water services items. Erin?
Yeah, just to answer your question, Chair Harrington, because I am sitting at a computer, January 3rd is the day that the next federal congressional is sworn in, on January 3rd.
Thank you.
The Clean Water Services state and federal agenda I've worked on with Mark Jockers to prepare what we expect to be coming forward for clean water services at the state and federal level. The state level advocacy is what Clean Water Services has an IGA with the county to provide those types of government relations assistance. They work with their own federal lobby team. Therefore, the federally adopted agenda is something they will work with their associates at Van Scoyoc to work through. But on the state agenda, I just wanted to make a couple of quick notes about the level of detail that is provided within the draft document. Really is highlighting some ongoing concerns for Clean Water Services to ensure that they're able to continue to provide the level of service that they have and continue the programs that they have adopted and started at your direction. But much of the work that's listed in the draft agenda at the state level will be undertaken through ongoing association-based work, where I will work to partner with those association lobbyists, especially where Clean Water Services either provides a unique or the more appropriate role in pushing that message across to the legislature. Nothing that's listed on those 2 pages will be a bill that Clean Water Services is asking to have drafted or asked to have introduced, but reflects the partnerships with those associations, other water and stormwater and sewer water agencies as they move forward with their advocacy at the state level. On the federal level, Clean Water Service, their priority continues to be focused on the sufficient funding for ongoing work with Scoggins Dam and the partnerships with the Bureau of Reclamation. So nothing has changed in the federal version of the agenda from 2020 to 2021. If there are small tweaks that Mark and I need to make, we will make them. But moving forward, we will ensure that the joint federal agenda is stylistically similar. So this is why, another reason why it's very much a draft is that we've significantly and robustly changed how we've presented the guiding principles for the county at the federal level, but we did not similarly change Clean Water Services. So we'll try and make it seem less like a disjointed document as we move forward and bring another draft forward for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions, and my understanding is Mark is also sitting there. He's very tiny on my screen and can further explain any details that you need from either of us. But with that, I'm happy.
Wave those little hands, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott. I did want to say a couple of things. I wanted to thank Aaron and the Washington County GR team for working with us on this. Aaron is correct, particularly on our state basis. We work very closely with associations in terms of kind of an approach, a collaborative approach with other utilities, other regulated stormwater and wastewater utilities in the state of Oregon, specifically working closely with the Special Districts Association of Oregon, League of Oregon Cities, and the Association of Clean Water Agencies. Clean Water Services is a key partner in that and has been very closely involved in developing the agendas, particularly for the Association of Clean Water Agencies. Most of our focus on a state basis has to do with the Department of Environmental Quality, our regulator, also water resource management. And then an issue that I know is near and dear to the chair's heart is flushable wipes. Okay, I'm sorry. But there is a bill that will be introduced this session. There's a couple of bills actually in the process that we have been providing, the Association of Clean Water Agencies and Clean Water Services, providing the technical data on related to the impact that those non-flushable wipes have on the public sewer system.
Is this the place where I'm supposed to tell you to can it?
You are supposed to say can the wipes.
Can the wipes.
Toilets are not trash cans. I think that was the other one we learned the other day. And like the county, there are COVID relief-related funds that are looking at water and sewer utilities. So we are certainly advocating on an association basis. And as Aaron properly said, We have a separate federal lobbyist, which also happens to also be Advanced Goyak and Associates, who helps us with that federal piece. It will remain largely the same, focused on Scoggins Dam. The other major piece on our federal level is Wapato Lake National Wildlife Refuge and the collaboration that we have out there with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
So if I could, Mark, since you collaborate with state agencies on kind of the state agenda, do you coordinate with WEFTEC or other national organizations in a federal agenda? You guys all share that information together?
So, Commissioner Willie, that's a very good question, and I think it's a good reflection on the conversations we had during our training session 2 weeks ago. We work very closely, particularly with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. I don't know if you remember Mr. Adam Krantz, who's the executive director there. They work on more of a legislative policy basis, as well as with Pat Sinacrapi of the Water Reuse Association. So often we provide the technical information necessary for them to advocate on items that we think are important to our customers.
Okay, thank you.
And during our presentation on the 17th, our Van Scoyoc federal lobbyist will be here, and I'm sending a text to Aaron, which you'll get in a minute, Aaron, to make sure that Clean Water Services invite their federal lobbyists to join us as well. Okay, next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, any questions about Clean Water Services, anything else? Great. All right, so next slide. So here we are. You know, I like a good to-do list. And so when I'm done here, I get to check the 20th off my list. We've given you the first walkthrough of the both state, federal, legislative agenda for both Washington County and Clean Water Services. For the next 2 weeks, we are available. And again, if you'd like to actively have us reach out and schedule something, Government Relations is happy to do that. If you'd like to review it and send comments or notes, that's fine too. We will ask for any final comments for this draft by the 29th, thus the date 21 through 29. 30th, we will submit our draft number 2. We'll be before you on the 3rd, and then any hopefully final tweaks, updates, edits, and then come before you on the 17th at a board meeting where we will present with our full team and our federal lobbyists and ask for adoption.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments, commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, team.
Thanks, team.
Okay. It's inside of 2:45. We have one more big topic, and then I have a short topic to ask the board about. So do you want to press on or take a brief break? What do you? Press on.
Just go on.
Okay,
yeah.
my body needs to stand up for a few minutes, so I'll do that while we move on to the next topic, House Bill 2001, Middle Housing Rulemaking.
Excellent. Even I don't know if you wanted to make any opening.
Just go ahead.
Okay. Hello again. Hopefully you're not legislated out. And we can talk a little bit more about some legislation that was passed last year, House Bill 2001, the Middle Housing Bill. Hello and good afternoon again, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. Teresa Cherniak, Principal Planner with Community Planning. We wanted to give you a briefing on the status of rulemaking on House Bill 2001. The board's heard about the rulemaking several times. We've been here in work session. And now it's heading into final consideration by the Land Conservation and Development Commission, or LCDC. So we wanted to provide you an update and an opportunity to weigh in. Kim Armstrong is also on the line in case there are any questions that Stephen and I can't answer. So next slide, please. So the Rules Advisory Committee, or RAC, has been meeting since last November, so for almost a year. And we've had 9 RAC meetings and at least as many technical advisory committee meetings. And now the draft rules are at the LCDC. The commission's first hearing was September 25th. And there were a number of comments that day. I think the meeting went for all morning into close to about 2 o'clock. The commissioners had a lot of questions and asked staff to work further with the RAC members on some specific topics, and I'll talk about those in a minute. The final hearing is expected at the November 12th and 13th meeting. And in between the September and November meeting, there was a final Rules Advisory Committee meeting. It was a joint one with the Technical Advisory Committee. Once the rules are adopted, which are expected in November, but they could go, if they needed to, into a special meeting in December. The rules just need to be adopted by the end of the year. So we'll have about 1.5 years until June 30th of 2022 to get regulations in place for the local area. Next slide. A little bit of an overview. House Bill 2001 was primarily to provide for a more diverse mix of housing types, different sizes and configurations to be built in neighborhoods that now only allow single family. While it wasn't directly the purpose of the bill, by increasing the number of units, encouraging smaller units, and providing extra income for rentals, this measure may also help move the needle on housing affordability. Next slide. At its most basic level, the provisions require that large cities outside metro and the counties and cities within metro allow a duplex on each lot or parcel that's designated for residential use inside the UGB, and that currently allow a detached dwelling. And then to allow all middle housing types, and those types are duplex, triplex, quadplex, townhouses, and cottage clusters. So they would all be allowed in areas designated for residential use inside the UGB that allow detached dwellings. And the biggest question in the rulemaking has been around what in areas means. Next slide. A little bit of context for the county. This map shows the location of all urban unincorporated land designated to allow single-family detached. So that's the sort of orange color, single-family detached residential. It includes nearly all of the county's residential land use designations. We estimate we have about 60,000 residential lots that allow single-family homes in the urban unincorporated area. And on that, it's about 17,000 acres that's in residential land use districts. Currently, the county would allow, but we wouldn't necessarily encourage or facilitate attached housing to be developed in most of these areas. Cottage clusters are the one where we only allow right now in a limited area, but otherwise we would allow the other types.
Well, I stand corrected. Commissioner Willie, I thought yours was the only district of our 4 districts that had no unincorporated land in the relative to metro. And those 3 little areas.
Little dinky yellow dots there. Most of what I'm noticing, I was looking over at Commissioner Treese there.
There's a big pumpkin-looking thing up there.
Well, between District
This
District
plenty-
1
this
and
plenty-
District
this
2.
plenty in my district, yeah. I'd say
Yeah.
about half is unincorporated, the other half is Beaverton,
Yeah,
roughly.
yeah, and District 3 has
Yes, it's
some as well.
some too. It's,
Yeah.
it's a big city. It's the biggest city in the county. By far.
Yes, indeed.
Well, juxtapositioning against the gray makes it pop that much more. But we see it.
Great. We could go to the next slide. So county staff has been actively involved on the rulemaking committees. And a lot of what's been talked about in the rulemaking has focused on either a model code or the minimum compliance standards. The model code are standards that would apply to directly if jurisdictions don't adopt the required code amendments into their own code. And they're intended to be consistent with the requirements and the intent of House Bill 2001. The minimum compliance requirements are probably what most jurisdictions will use. Most have their own ways that they have their codes set up, and they'll be working to work in the provisions into their own codes. And that's what we would expect to do here for the county. So this includes the minimum standards that the development codes have to comply with to meet the House Bill 2001 requirements. And they include kind of the sideboards of the minimums and maximums of things that we would need to be including. The performance metric approach is actually not a separate thing, but is an option within the minimum compliance standards. And this is a flexible option that really a number of the cities have been pushing for to allow some more flexibility relative to minimum lot size and maximum density standards. They still have some pretty strict parameters that are set there, but they would provide some flexibility. And my next slide will go into that. So DLCD staff developed this approach to provide certainty through clear metrics that still ensure compliance with the House Bill 2001 requirements, but provide some flexibility for cities and the county, or counties. So the next slide shows kind of a comparison between minimum compliance and the performance metric approach. It really has to do with lot size in this case. And so if you'll see on the minimum compliance standards, jurisdictions would be required to allow a triplex on all lots that are 5,000 square feet or larger, a quadplex on all lots that are 7,000 square feet or larger. Townhouses would have a different lot size that's quite small, 1,500 square feet. And then cottage clusters would be allowed on all lots that are 7,000 square feet or larger. So if we would use this approach, no additional analysis would be required in order to establish that. And it would be likely that these lot sizes would be kind of spread across the whole county area. With the performance metric approach, you would be required to allow these same types of units on certain specified percentages of your lots. So you'd have to allow triplexes on a greater percent down to the cottage clusters on a lesser percent. So from 80% down to 50%. To use this approach, you have to do some additional analysis. So however you would decide to do this, and there could be any number of ways that you could do this, you would have to show that at least 75% of the lots in each census block group would allow duplexes and at least one other middle housing type. And then every 6 years, you'd be needing to show how you're complying with this. So there's a lot of additional analysis. There's the idea with the census block group is to ensure that there's equity in distribution of the middle housing types, so that not that you were concentrating all the types in one area and only duplexes in another area. The idea is that there be a distribution across your jurisdiction.
Just a quick question. When you talk about 80% of lots, 70%, are you speaking of in any given census block group or within the entire unincorporated Washington County? Or what's the 80% reference to?
So the 80, 70, 60, and 50, I think would be overall, the lots overall. But then you would have to do an assessment of each census block group and make sure that you are allowing at least one other than a duplex on at least 75% of the lots by block group. So there's a two-step analysis there.
Is that without reference to size of the lot?
This one doesn't reference the size of the lot. The minimum compliance talks about the size.
Right.
You probably would end up looking at size if you were doing the performance metric, but it doesn't require it.
Okay.
And so cities have asked for flexibility to be able to look at it in different ways. Maybe they would go by lot size, maybe there would be some other way that they could divide things that didn't do that. And it allows that kind of flexibility for them to decide, or for us, for that matter, to decide if we wanted to go that way too.
So to make sure I understand the percentage of lots, so within a jurisdiction, so whether it's a city or us for the entirety of the UUAs, for the whole percentage of single-family lots, then if we're going to go the performance metrics approach, then we have to allow this level of percentage across all of those existing lots or developable lots?
Our understanding is it would apply to all lots that are designated for residential use within our jurisdiction. So it would be existing lots. But over time, as you add more lots, you probably would need to be redoing your calculations because those percentages would change.
And this is to allow, it doesn't, I mean, it's still going to be ultimately individual property owners will have to take the initiative, but we can't say no to them if we're going to be doing something less than 80%. If we're in a position, yeah. Okay.
It's allowing
Allow
it
it,
to
yes.
happen
Okay,
versus
I'll leave it at that.
requiring it to happen, right?
I was going to say, this is all voluntary, so
Right.
if we had 0 applications, I don't know how we'd meet compliance, but if we had 0 applications, then we have 0 projects that qualify in this arena. So as long as we're not held to a standard of saying, no, you can't build a single-family house there because it's 7,000 square feet, so you have to build a house and a quadplex or a house and a duplex, or so that's not the direction we're going on this. This is all strictly voluntary, right?
Yes.
It is voluntary. I
I was
think,
going to say, I think a good way to think of these as allowances. You have to allow this type of development to occur on those size lots or on that percentage of lots.
Yeah, but we're not.
But we're not
Again, we're not
mandating,
mandating something just because it would fall into this criteria. We're not mandating that they do something other than what they want to.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
and there are a couple of things too to think about that I think we'll be bringing forward policy choices to the board on whether you might want us to do more than just allow. So there might you want us to try to encourage certain types in certain areas. So there'll be some choices like that as we develop the program and start looking at the analysis, we can bring that forward to the board and have some more discussions about where you might want to go with that.
I think the more common, at least sort of maybe possibly anticipated scenario would be the one where somebody wishes to put in triplexes or quadplexes or townhomes, and the surrounding neighborhood and homeowners association there says, you know, any number of reasons why we don't think that's a good idea, and the city and or county says, yeah, we're not going to allow that. That won't be possible now. We're going to have to say sorry, but we have to allow this. Our hands are tied, if you want to put it that way.
I don't understand. Was it previously presented that an HOA, an existing HOA, if they didn't allow, would supersede this?
So I think there's the land use realm, and then there's the civil realm. So the HOAs are civil. It's a civil issue between property owners, essentially, and or an association. Ours is really just about what the land use rules would allow. So it's very possible you could have a situation where the land use rules would allow the construction of a middle housing type. A homeowners association or a covenant on the property may not require it, but we would be in a position of issuing a permit, and then it really becomes a matter between the folks that are parties to the covenant, whether they want to try to enforce that.
Okay, and my understanding was a covenant could not, the HOA could not write it in past the implementation date.
That's correct, after
So-
January 1
Right,
of
okay.
2019 or 2020? 2020, I believe.
As of the date of the.
So it's already passed.
Passage of the bill.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's something that I brought up because I live in an HOA, obviously, and we checked into that, and our charter does preclude that. But as Stephen said that if somebody wanted to challenge that, that would probably be difficult to enforce, but it had to be in there before. We used December 31, 19 was our date, so it was effective January 1. Yeah. Yeah. Good luck trying to be the first one in the queue for defending that.
That has been a topic at the Land Conservation Development Commission meetings. 1,000 Friends brought it up, concerns about the CC&Rs, or codes, covenants, and restrictions, being allowed to sort of limit middle housing, and they were really wanting for something to be done about that. And really, it is a civil legal issue, and it's really not certain whether anything can happen with that. So that is something that's in place right now. We've done some very preliminary analysis at this point, and it looks like these two approaches may, for us, result in a similar outcomes. And so very preliminarily, we're thinking that we may recommend going the minimum compliance route. But again, that's very preliminary, and I think we need to do a lot more analysis and bring that forward to the board. Next slide. At the LCDC meeting, there was a lot of testimony, primarily from cities, but also from developers and housing advocates. Some cities still felt the draft rules interpreting the areas where middle housing was allowed still didn't provide enough flexibility. Some developers expressed concerns that the draft rules were inflexible and prescriptive. And then the Fair Housing Council of Oregon and LCDC noted that the status quo has resulted in inequitable outcomes and perpetuates exclusionary patterns. So they were really pushing for rules that would provide for middle housing kind of across the board in jurisdictions.
I'm sorry, I have a question that was back on one of your prior slides with the minimum and the performance. As LCDC has perhaps had slide presentations of what various implementations might look like or lead towards in order to help people better understand possible outcomes. With tris and quads, have they shown horizontal flats and not just vertical units for tris and quads?
I think they've looked at, yes, the variety of ways that those could be provided.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, there is also still, I'll get to this in a second, I think, but I can say it now. A couple cities have volunteered to be guinea pigs for looking at how these two approaches might work for them. So Beaverton and Springfield are in that process right now with DLCD staff. We haven't seen that outcome yet, and so that may result in some further changes. But they're trying to sort through how it might work to see if there might be some tweaks to be made to the regulations. So next slide. There was a RAC and joint RAC Rules Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee meeting October 8th, and DLCD staff went over changes that they were proposing since the LCDC meeting. Mostly they were technical and language fixes, including standards for master planned areas and cottage clusters, and some design standards. The performance metric approach, they're still looking at further. They're talking with Beaverton and Springfield on how it might work there, and they may be proposing some changes, but we haven't seen anything at this point. And there was some possibility that they would look at changing the parking limits, but they aren't recommending changes to that at this point. And the limits there are that jurisdictions can't require any more than one off-street space per unit.
When referring to master planned areas, is that the equivalent of PUDs, planned unit developments as well?
No, it's actually more like North Bethany or Villebois.
Oh, concept
or-
master planned
right,
areas, and,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so large areas that were planned by a jurisdiction, not by a private developer, for the most part. Next slide. So within the county, I did mention at a very preliminary level, we are likely to recommend using the minimum compliance standards. Again, we need to do a lot more analysis. We haven't been able to do all of that. So we don't know exactly what the outcome would be, but without having other kind of policy direction from the board at this time, that's our preliminary thinking.
I would just add too, I think the other attractions, if you'll recall the table that we saw earlier, it doesn't require a huge amount of additional analysis. Might minimize the number of difficult choices that, we would need to make locally, and then does not require the ongoing periodic compliance review as well.
And as far as that ongoing periodic compliance review.
Commissioner Teresa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, you're talking about recommending the minimum compliance standards. Do you have any sense for what the other jurisdictions within the county are going to be recommending?
I don't know offhand. Beaverton has been one of the greatest proponents for flexibility. So I would assume that they probably will be looking at that. Hillsborough has also been interested in flexibility, but they've been probably more interested in flexibility on the design standards side of it. Wilsonville has been most interested in flexibility regarding the master planned communities because they do a lot of master planning for their areas.
Tigard has done quite a bit of work too, is that correct?
Tigard, probably more like mostly Basalt Creek, probably.
Okay.
I'm sorry, River Terrace.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was thinking Twelton. Yeah, probably River Terrace. Yeah, it would be applicable there. And maybe even the Tigard Triangle, there, depending on how much residential is there, I'm not sure.
Thanks.
Next slide then. So the next steps, we wanted to bring this forward to the board before LCDC did their potentially final rulemaking to see if there was any board interest in possibly submitting a letter, if there was any concern with any of the things that you were hearing here, and or if there's general support, general opposition. Now might be the time that we could craft something and bring that forward. And then just to let you know, we do have a technical assistance grant that we got from DLCD looking at economic feasibility research and analysis. So that's looking across our different communities at where we think middle housing might be feasible to develop, the likely implications on infrastructure, possible equity implications of that middle housing development, and then impacts on potential county strategies. So we'd be bringing that forward. That's a grant that goes through June, so we're really just getting started on that. But our thought is that that will really help inform some of the recommendations that we might make to the board.
Can I pause you right there? Where middle housing might be feasible? Well, the whole point of this bill is to make it allowable. So what is the difference between allowable and feasible? What type of feasible are you saying?
It's probably primarily economic feasibility.
So financially feasible for developers?
Property owners and developers.
I think there's maybe a complex relationship between sometimes the value of an improvement on a lot and the value of the property itself, and does, when those two things hit a certain threshold, that may make redevelopment of a property more likely. So I think the intent of it is largely an economic feasibility sort of evaluation.
And part of the question we're trying to answer is various people have either said, oh, we're not going to get very much of this, and so it'll be incremental, we shouldn't worry about potential impacts to our infrastructure, that sort of thing. And so we're just looking at where might it be likely to happen based on a variety of factors, and might there be impacts to some of our areas that we would want to be looking at more closely, and then testing different factors to see, say, if the board did want to try to encourage more or discourage, or however you might want to go, what factors might play into that we could consider looking at.
Well, I'm really curious about your syncing up with some of your colleagues through the Metro Technical Advisory Committee to MPAC, because I'm more familiar with how there's commonality of programs like this across jurisdiction than not. And so it might make it more attractive if Washington County for the UUAs is one geography and another geography in the region partnering up. And I know that there, over the years, have been smaller jurisdictions that asked Metro to develop some model code for different things as well, like the cottage housing. So there may be some opportunity there to make us more successful in securing such a grant.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I had a specific comment on that one thing. I didn't mean to. Commissioners, any questions or comments at this stage?
More to come.
Well, if I could just, I particularly don't like this, but obviously nobody asked me. It used to be back in the good old days when we'd go to MPAC and we were working on developing South Hillsborough. The whole total focus was dwelling units per acre. And that was a criteria that obviously Metro wanted a higher number than what we felt was feasible, and so we had to do a variety of negotiations, and I think probably bottom line is the real dwelling units per acre in South Hillsborough is going to probably exceed the expectations or the criteria that we talked about early on. And then I remember, and I don't remember exactly what the statistic was, but then you could get dwelling units per acre for the city of Hillsborough and for the city of Beaverton and for the city of Portland. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this, I think we estimated that our dwelling units per acre was higher than Portland in many areas in Hillsborough. And so then now we have this, what is called middle housing. And to me, I don't see where the connectivity is. This is not going to generate middle housing, I don't believe. But I think just in order for us to comply with this, obviously we don't have any options in doing that, but it's going to be interesting to me 5 years from now or 10 years from now, taking a look back to see, was there really any benefit to this? And I also, I've heard the city's concerns about their infrastructure is not built for these kinds of densities in single-family neighborhoods. So it's going to be interesting to me, see what all comes out on this. And I don't know, Mark, is this going to have an impact on clean water services in any regards? Because you guys certainly build your structure based on a certain amount of occupancy and volume and all those kinds of things. I mean, does this have any impact on you?
Well, Diane's answered that question before.
Yeah, we've looked at that before, and we have coordinated with these folks here on that, and we don't see a big impact on even if you go to the outside edges.
I would hope that you had plenty of capacity
Yeah.
when you build your stations, so.
The driver for us is more when you add additional land than it is than the densification, because the infrastructure's there typically and can handle it.
Yeah, because did you have to do something special for the South Hillsborough development? Because that station would be on River Road, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would all go to the Durham facility, I mean, the Rock Creek facility. And the thing is, with new development, 90% of that new land is actually built by the developer itself and then dedicated over to the public. So there was lots of new infrastructure put there, but that was put in by the developer.
Okay. All right.
So, not seeing anything from the other commissioners, I'll say I'm not concerned about particulars that I'm hearing during this rulemaking process. What I do want to make sure that we have well in our sights is the fact that we have to meet the compliance need by the end of June of 2022, which is essentially only a year and a half away. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done through the 2021 work plan and finishing up in the 2022 work plan. This past year, even before we had a draft work plan, it seemed like there was a lot of input items for the work program. And so we're already recognizing that, considering follow-up work to the significant natural resources and this item, we already have two very large items to grapple with. And Andy's shaking his head. He's probably remembering some other big-ticket items that I have long forgotten, but I know you all will remind me soon enough.
Yeah, it'll be here before you know it.
Yeah, yes. Anything else, commissioners? Thank you for outlining this, and thank you for participating in the rack and the tack.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
staying totally on top of this subject for us.
Great, thank you all.
Great. That's it for the planned agenda topics. Based upon some public registering for input at today's business meeting, I wanted to just touch bases with you commissioners, as well as with both our CAO and our legal counsel, and our clerk may have some thoughts on this too. And that is with regard to recognizing groups. For group testimony, this county has a longstanding tradition of recognizing CPOs, as well as those very active and involved nonprofit groups that we have a history of knowing their track record of membership meetings and mostly technical policy and technical experts that serve to inform us and give us their expertise in particular areas. We have not to date recognized WC CAN spokespersons as a group. What we did hear today is that Mr. Feek has been designated as the spokesperson for the board, and that he provides his advance testimony to that board, and that unless they say otherwise, they support his position. But could you please, Brad, remind us of what the procedures say?
Yes. So, well, depending on the situation, but for ordinances, we give 12 minutes per group recognized by the presiding officer. And then e.g. CPOs, established business and homeowners associations. That's what it says right now.
So it was 12 minutes.
It was 12 minutes because that the first individual didn't go anywhere near it. I just let it be. So, but yeah, that,
You mean, is it 12 minutes for all groups, or each group gets 12 minutes?
12 minutes per group.
Okay, so there was that hiccup during where, but then it was 3 minutes per individual, right?
Correct, 3 minutes per individual.
Okay.
I've
So,
never heard that 12 minutes. And neither had, it's interesting, Roy, who's been sitting here a very long time, hadn't heard of the 12 minutes either, so I don't know where that
remind
came
me,
from.
what's the provision for 10 minutes?
Had you?
Yeah, so it shortens, so it got a little complex today because it was a engrossed ordinance, i.e. They went back and changed what was initially sent before you, and that's why you got into the 12 minutes instead of the 5 minutes.
Got it.
So if it was a second hearing on the same language, it would have been 5 minutes.
Got it.
Oh, I see, okay.
Got it.
So basically, the premise is, we engrossed it, so they should have more time to weigh in and convey their thoughts about the engrossment.
That's correct. I mean, yeah, the big concept is, you know, you're looking at something different now, so they should get the full 12 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and my thoughts were, have been that I think we need to be kind of careful about looking like we're playing favorites or that we're being arbitrary or something. I think we should either we'll say something like we only recognize CPOs as the only one that gets that kind of treatment, or maybe none. But once we talk about groups, I think there's, based on the First Amendment and sort of other general concepts of expression, bars have to be, I think, somewhat reasonably low, if you want to use that word, for a group. I mean, some group that I've never heard of that just kind of is created, someone just sort of makes it up on the fly. I think I'd say no, I'm sorry, but obviously Westside Government Alliance is a
Oh, your microphone, sorry.
Yeah, and the WCCAN has been around for quite a while too now. So I don't know, we want to be in a position to sort of get into the sort of inner dynamics of how much of a group they really are or not. And so my own feeling is that we either are going to be restrictive and make that very explicit, or if we're going to have a general rule about recognizing a group and giving them additional time, then I think we have to set a fairly low bar, whether we particularly like a group or like a particular individual or that type of thing is really neither here nor there. That's sort of my...
And I agree, and I don't think that's what the issue is. I think it's really just kind of trying to figure out what, you know, what the rules are. And I'm looking at WCCAN's board list right now, and we had 3 of their board members testifying today. So, and Jim Long said he was not representing them. And I'm not sure if Greg said the same thing, but there's also that confusion, you know?
Yeah, there's that.
And if you get 12 minutes per person, I mean,
No, it's only one 12-minute period for a group.
okay, but then the next 2, if they're from the same group, get,
Well, Greg said he was not testifying.
on behalf.
Right. And then the third person, I can't remember her name now.
Well, Jim Long was one of them. I was just looking at their board list.
Well, and Kathy knows, how did Jim sign up? In what capacity?
It was CPO.
He signed up as a representative CPO 4M.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it's 4M and sometimes it's CCI, but I wasn't sure if today he was Jim Long, the individual, Jim Long.
He mentioned the CPO, and I thought he said he represented the CPO. Yeah.
So how do we know the individual who says, I'm representing X, are actually representing X?
Well, so this is where I want to make sure then in terms of the sign-up procedure, it's clear that they'd only get group time if they indicate they're representing a group, right? Like in a few weeks ago, there was TRK, Ashley Short, who testified, Ezra Hammer for the Home Builders Association, and then WC Can at least. And so after that meeting is when I went back and investigated WC Can, because for years they did fall away and they weren't active at all. So.
Chair, so currently when people sign up, the questions that are asked are how they would like to provide the testimony, the meeting that they want to provide it at, what point do they want to speak, the topic, are they coming as individuals or groups, and what's that group's name, and the number of people with the comment.
Well, so I think that may be a little confusing for some. There is a group of people, and then what group are they representing?
Correct.
And because sometimes we have the possibility of each case where there are multiple people who want to testify as part of a group, but they only get time as a full group, right? As opposed to someone who is representing a group/organization. So I wanted to have this discussion to, while it says per the presiding officer, I wanted to make sure I had the benefit of prior history with the board, prior experiences, best practice, and making sure that we had some good discussion about it. So.
It's my recollection that in the past, and maybe this is going to be a distant past, we had groups that came that spoke for key ordinances or whatever, and unless, we would tend to recognize them as a group, whether that was business group or some well-established neighborhood group or some group that advocates, such as 12 River Keepers, any of those. It was a fairly low bar. But I have to say that people, by and large, it wasn't abused. We would occasionally have long, like we do now, have long hearings, and it's challenging and it can be tiring. But you just got to grit your teeth and you go through it, and you go through a very long evening. But we tended to be fairly expansive about, and we kind of would assume that people were honest about what their representations, and if there was some issues about whether that was really true or not, they might be called to challenge by their group later on. Mm-hmm. But that was not really our place to try to second guess any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else? All right, well, thank you very much. Okay, anything else for today's work session? All right, we're adjourned.